Welcome to the Boom Show, building open-minded, optimistic, and motivated teens. Here I interview thought leaders, educators, authors, and more importantly, people with inspiring stories where they had to overcome obstacles and turn those obstacles into opportunity. Today, I have my good friend, Mark A. Parks Jr., author of The Gift, the essential guide for investments for women. I can't wait to get him on here. This is his book here. You're going to get a copy of that on Amazon.com. But more importantly, we're going to dive into financial literacy. We're going to talk about being a CPA and the challenges that he had to overcome we're going to talk about where he's from in East Cleveland. So I can't wait to jump into this show. This man has a wealth of knowledge and energy, and he's one of my closest friends here in South Florida. Once again, welcome to the Boom Show. Let's get into this interview. Boom. What's up, everybody? Rahz here, aka The Motivator, and you are tuning in to The Boom Show. Today, we got another great interview with a young man that I believe that you guys are going to get blown away with the information. As you know, this show is all about bringing authors, thought leaders, and people with inspiring stories to really share how they got to where they got by sharing their authentic, real stories. I'd like to introduce you to my friend, Mark. How you doing, buddy?
I'm great. Great to be here. Looking forward to the interview.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, the way we get in is we get in hot right away. So I want us to to tell us a little bit about who has been the most inspirational or role model in your life that's helped you create success.
I think about this question a lot, and I know a lot of people use celebrities, but for me, it was actually my father. My father would always tell this story about how he came up from the country as a barefoot boy with 79 cents. He met my mother and he ended up being this great businessman. It's kind of funny because I'm writing my second book and I was just thinking about something that my father did. Growing up, there was an area near where we lived. It was called Murray Hill. And it was an Italian neighborhood. And way back then, Black people weren't able to really go in that neighborhood without being harassed. But my father, who is darker than I and clearly a Black man, would go there all the time. And people would ask him why. And he would say, because they have the best pizza. And I have kind of taken that attitude with race myself. I don't put any boundaries or limits on where I could go or any of that. But my father, that's just the kind of person he was. But the other thing, after he came up from the country, which he did because I had visited that place growing up, he ended up being a real estate broker. And in order to be a real estate broker, you have to do a significant amount of transactions, some being commercial, and then you have to get several licenses, and then you have to be able to supervise and train people and all of that. And he did that way back in the 70s. He had his own office, he had many agents, and he was a very well-respected realtor. Later in life, I found out that many of my friends, as well as my cousins and relatives, attributed him for their ability to have gotten a house. I've had friends who I never even knew about, what went on, who said, my father told me if it wouldn't have been for your dad, we never would have been homeowners. So he really was a trendsetter, very active in the community, and I just try to follow in his footsteps.
Great answer, my friend. I'd love to give us a little bit of your backstory because I know now that your father was your role model, which is fantastic. And in our community, that's not so often the case. And I'd love for you to share us a little bit of your background story so the viewers can know a little bit about who is Mark Parks.
Okay, so Mark Parks grew up in a little town called East Cleveland, Ohio. East Cleveland back then was a solidly blue collar neighborhood. Many of the children who I grew up with had, the full homes with the father and the mother. Most were homeowners, and most of the men worked at like the post office, or, a couple of guys were like butchers, or they worked in foundries. A lot of the women were teachers and nurses, and it was a nice neighborhood. We had nice parks, we had nice amenities, and I felt relatively safe. I grew up there, and then I went to a college called Baldwin Wallace, which was maybe a half hour away from where I grew up, small private college. Um, and I majored in business administration and political science. After I finished college, I went into banking, and I worked in a division, consumer credit, where you give out loans for cars and that type of thing. And there was this position called controller. And controller is like the financial head of a department who just happens to be a CPA. I like the title and I like the duties. So I went back to school to get the required coursework to become a CPA. So I was a non-traditional CPA. I had been married, I had my first child, and I went back to school and I took the exam and passed it. And then I kind of changed directions and became a CPA, which is a certified public accountant for those of you who are not familiar with that. And that is a very difficult test. They say about 1% of people pass it the first time and 10% of people pass it ever. So it was quite a challenge.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that because my wife is also an accountant. So I understand there's multiple parts to this exam. Can you just share with us the level of what it took that you, in the dedication you had to put into as a second career to put in the time in? What was that like for you?
So as I mentioned, I was a non-traditional person taking the test. So I was actually working a full-time job and I had a baby. And what I would do is, first of all, I would drop my son off to the daycare in the morning. So back then, some of you may not know what this is, but we had something called cassette tapes. So I had I had these cassette tapes where I had recorded all these terms. So as we were going to the daycare and I was driving to work from the daycare, I was listening to these terms. So my oldest son may have some innate ability with numbers, but every day after I left work, I would go to the library from 5 to 9. That was Monday through Friday. On Saturday, I would go to the library from 9 to 5. And on Sunday, from 1 to 5. And as I got closer to the exam, I started going to our college library, which was open until 11 p.m. on Sunday. But to get to that point, you took this review course. It was called Becker Review. Becker said, if you come to all of our classes, if you do all your homework and you study 500 hours in this 6-month period, you'll pass the test. If you don't, you could come back for free. So me being a slightly overachiever, I studied 600 hours in that time frame, and still I passed 2 and had to go back 6 months later and pass the final 2. Wow. So it was quite intense.
Yeah, I definitely, I can commend you on that challenge of yourself and the dedication it must have taken to just get yourself to do that work every day, because a lot of people struggle with doing the thing they know they need to do consistently long enough so that they can actually accomplish the outcome they want. Can you tell us, where do you think your dedication to academics came from?
When I grew up, academics was cool. It's funny because one of my good friends, we would go to the library like every Saturday and get books and read them. And it's not just me, other people would probably tell you we were 2 of the coolest guys in school at that point. And at some point that changed. But back then, I mean, the smart kids and the ones who read and did well in math were, kind of cool. So I just enjoyed, first of all, I liked learning. Learning gives you a good feeling. When I learn something new, it's exciting. It makes my body feel good. But I think back then, we really didn't have a lot of options. I mean, you had to go to school, you had to do well, or, sometimes there was consequences. I mean, my parents weren't as extreme as some. I remember, and I'll see all these people this weekend, but I remember this young lady who got a C on her report card, and she sat at her desk crying, like scared to go home. And they're like, "What's wrong with you?" She's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get in so much trouble because I got a C." So grades were really emphasized because that was said to be the way out of the hood, to perform well in academics.
A word from our sponsor. As a parent, it is emotionally draining to see your child suffering from low self-esteem, lacking confidence, and social skills. Rahz and Michelle Slaughter's book, Student Success Secrets, unlock the 7 secrets for developing inspired, motivated, success-driven teens is a must-read book for every emerging teenager. Purchase a copy today at rahzslaughter.com or amazon.com. So let's just, our viewers are parents, they're authors, they're educators. So I'm a big on learning. I did really poorly in high school. I focused a lot of my energy on sports, and I struggled because I never had that North Star, that guiding light to say, hey, you know what? This is important. This is how you get to the next level. But I found it, and I was lucky to go on a search of my own. What do you tell, I know you get the opportunity to speak and you're an author. What would you tell, maybe a parent whose child is not so academically inclined, how to inspire them to kind of push them a little bit, the importance of education and getting themselves to that next level in their lives?
Well, I'll be honest. I had a lot of pretty natural ability, but when I got to high school, I really wasn't working really hard. So my grades were C plus. I came out of high school with like a C plus average. But what was explained to me a little later in life, and it was actually by a CPA, is that school is easy. And Rahz, you're out here in life. When you're in school, they tell you what to do and they show you how to do it. That's easy, because if you just do it, if you do well academically, your life could be a lot easier. And that's a fact. But a lot of us are distracted. Like, I like to have fun and I like to mess around and all of that. But I could have taken that same energy. I proved it later in life. But when I was growing up, I could have taken that same energy and really focused on my studies and done a lot better. I caught on to the power of studying when I pledged a fraternity in college. In college, in that fraternity, you had to study 4 hours a day, mandatory. That was part of the process. So when I got initiated into the fraternity, I kept that process up. So when I would leave, I had classes till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I would go to the girls' dorm and watch all my children, the soap opera. And then I would go to the library for 4 hours. And then after that, I was out on campus hanging out and kicking it. And I recall somebody said, "How is this guy graduating in 4 years? And he's always out and about, partying and that type of thing." But somebody said, "No, I see this guy go to the library every day for 4 hours." So if you focus your energy on your academics, it's not that hard. But you have to focus it and, get that mindset, and it does pay off.
I love that. So tell us a little bit about, now you're currently, where are you right now? We know that you went to school, you pledged a fraternity, you went to college. How has your career taken on itself over the last few years?
Well, my career, as I started in banking many years ago, and I worked in an accounting department, and I saw this position called controller, which is the head of a division. And I was in banking, like I said, and it was the numbers guy. So not only did I like the title controller, I also liked the span of responsibility. So I went back to school to take the courses necessarily to be a CPA. I came out, took the test, and then I worked at a public housing authority, a very large one. And I got promoted relatively rapidly. And I worked there for a number of years. Then I worked at this organization called the Cleveland Clinic, which you have here in Florida, but in Cleveland, which is where they're from, it's a massive organization with over 50,000 employees. And they only hire the absolute best people. But I worked there for a number of years and learned a ton of information. And then I went on to work for the county. And in Cleveland, the county has 1.2 million people, $1 billion budget. And I went from budget analyst all the way up to chief financial officer for that county. I subsequently came here after working at the county for 10 years, primarily because my wife wanted to live somewhere warmer. And this is warmer. So then I became the CFO for the city of West Palm Beach. So I'm actually on my next stage. I've left the city of West Palm Beach, and my goal is to continue to write in the area that I write on and to get out there and speak and spread the knowledge of financial literacy and just the good news that if you aim and focus on something, there's a very high likelihood that you could achieve it.
I love that. I'm huge on setting goals. Goals are something that I understand. I call it the GPS for success. And we're both speakers, but you've also authored a really great book for financial literacy. And I'd love for you to kind of share the story and the inspiration behind this book here, which, you know, you can all pick up on Amazon, and we'll make sure to put the links in the comments below. But tell us a little bit about the gift and what was the inspiration behind that? Because I love the story.
Okay, so that's interesting too. So you talked about role models, and I mentioned my father, but the inspiration for the gift was actually my sister. And my sister is 7 years older than me. And my sister always did everything right. She was, you know, what they used to call a goody two shoes. And she went through school, did well. She came out and became an educator. I had just started a career as a financial advisor, and I went to see my sister. It was actually the first time I had went on an appointment without my manager, but I figured it, you know, it was my sister. So if I didn't do well, it would be okay. So I asked her about her investment portfolio. She said, I don't have one. I said, why not? She said, investments is not my thing. I don't know anything about it. So I said, well, why not get a financial advisor? She said, well, I don't know what to ask. I don't know who to trust. And at that point, I said, if this successful, educated woman could have this issue, are there more? And I started to ask ladies about their investment experience. And a lot of them were in the same place. They would say, look, I'm a teacher. Investment is not my thing. I'm very good at what I do, but this I don't understand. So I set out to write a book that would help people who are less inclined to get into investment. So the book is real life stories of real women. And at the end of every chapter, I made recommendations on how they could have done their financial lives differently and become successful. When I started out writing the book, a lot of women told me they didn't like the textbooks type of investment book. So I always tell people, this is not your grandmother's investment book. It's an easy read. You'll blow through the first 100 pages very easily as you go through the stories, and hopefully you identify yourself. But then it goes into investment terms, which is a barrier sometimes. And then it talks about all the investments from annuities to zero coupon bonds. And then it talks about how do you evaluate your investments. And I took that straight off of the Securities Exchange Commission and the Financial Regulatory Agency's website, because I wanted it to be impartial on how you would gauge your investing. And then the almost final chapter was a step-by-step approach that if you did these things, you would be financially secure.
I love that.
So that's the gift. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Definitely, we got to pick up a copy of that, and we'll make sure to put that above here. Real quick, so like I got to be devil's advocate though, so because you're gonna get this, and I'm sure, Mark. I hear the importance of investing. It's so important to invest, but I just don't have enough money right now to get started. I got to save before I can get started. What do you tell that viewer who says that they need to they just need to get themselves into a position to start to look at investing?
Okay, so I'll tell you a story from my mother and I. When I came out of college at about 22 years old, my mother, who was a prolific saver, would call me just about every Saturday and say, "Are you saving money?" And I would say, "Mom, I don't even make enough money to pay my bills. How could I save?" She said, "You could save $5 or $10. I would say, "I don't make enough money to pay my bills." She would follow up and say, "Did you go to the club last night?" Now, when I was in my 20s, Saturday night, that was almost 100% of the time. And I would spend anywhere from $50 up, and up is the operative term. So the reality is, I just needed to reposition my thinking and save a little money. I did a calculation. I think it was if I saved $10 a week in my 20s, I would have had $5,000 by the time I was 30. And I could tell you statistically, a lot of 30-year-olds don't have $5,000. So even if you just started with a small amount, and you know this, Rahz, it's a matter of setting a habit. So if you start just saying $10 a week or $40 a month, and you, first of all, you want to pay yourself first. So if it's $10, it's not going to make a major difference in your life one way or the other. So if you just say, you know what, I'm going to set aside $10 for myself every week, and then I'll deal with the bills. Once you develop that habit and you start to make more money, you just appropriate more money to that, and you continue to do that. And next thing you know, you got this great habit and you got some money.
That's a great tip. I love that tip. It's something that I read in an old book as well. And it kind of stuck with me, and it has stuck with me. And I focus on that a lot. I save a lot of my change. I do a lot of these little things to create a game out of it. I gamify my savings and my investing so that it puts me in a position to be not worried about, where the next dollar is coming from. And I could think about my creative and what's next for me to move to my next level, like you're having the opportunity to do now, where you're authoring books and speaking. Does your child lack confidence, social skills, or motivation? Rahz Slaughter is a sought-after teen life coach, motivational speaker, and 20-year professional coach. He welcomes the opportunity to coach your teen on a one-on-one basis or as one of his students in his online groups. Rahz's coaching system will help your teen boost their confidence, improve their communication skills, and gain clarity about who they are and how they can reach their full potential in school, sport, and life. To learn more about the coaching programs or to schedule a consultation, call 1-800-509-9383 or visit us at our website at rahzslaughter.com. If you mention the Boom Show, you'll receive 10% off the coaching program that you enroll your child. Tell us a little bit I want to know, I know you're going on a trip this weekend, and I love hearing this show is all about students. That's my passion, inspiring and motivating teens and helping especially ethnic kids understand the power of their mind and how they can truly succeed in anything they do. What are you working on this weekend, and what charitable opportunities have you been a part of?
Well, I'll speak to, and I'm leaving actually at 6:00 in the morning to go to East Cleveland, Ohio. We have one of the most successful urban alumni associations in the country. And actually, I was the charter president of that organization. And the charter president is the first president before the organization, when they got chartered, actually. So in our neighborhood, which was East Cleveland, Ohio, when I grew up, it was solid blue collar suburb. And then they did some things. First of all, we had political corruption where some money was stolen from the city. And then we also had these things called blockbusting where they would, change the neighborhood in a negative way by, kind of chasing people away. So by time I finished high school, I will tell you, my sister is 7 years older than I am. When my sister was in school, there were probably, I'd say 30 Black people in her class. When I got there 7 years later, there was probably no more than 100 white people in the entire school. So it changed over very quickly. So now the city that was this solid blue collar town is one of the poorest cities in the country. But having had the positive experience that I did and the people who went to school with me, we decided that we would set up an alumni association to help the students that are there now. We have a weekend event. So typically what we do is we'll have a sporting event where we'll have a basketball game with our players, alumni, and then another school, which is hilarious because these guys are like 40, 50 years old trying to run up and down the basketball court. But that brings in a lot of people from both of those areas and we raise money. The second day, which is the Friday, we have a meet and greet. And we typically have about 700 people there at this event. Then on the Saturday, we leave it open for all the classes to do their own thing. So whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever the increments, those classes have their own event. And on Sunday, the day before Labor Day, we have this massive cookout. And it's at the park where we grew up. And there's typically about 5,000 people there. And it's gotten so big that people come there the day before so that they can set up their tents and their spot and come to this event. But we call it a party with a purpose because we've given that school hundreds of thousands of dollars. The band, which was legendary when I was there, still has a great reputation. We paid for them to go to China and play in the Olympics. We paid for mock trials. We give away typically 10 to 30 scholarships every year. Unfortunately, we have some homeless students every once in a while. So we've paid for them to take care of transitional housing. We bought them clothing. We also have recruited some of the alumni who are at senior levels in their positions to go in, and we do a student summit where they're with us all day. We feed them, we talk to them, we help them with their careers, and we try to build relationships with the students. So we've done a lot, and it's made a difference. I know for a fact that one of the kids who we gave a scholarship to at this point, probably 10 years ago, went through school, got her master's degree, and came back and set up a nonprofit to help the school as well. So it's multiplying its effect. So that's where I'm headed. And the other thing is it's a whole lot of fun, because my wife likes to laugh, but I'm going to see, thousands of my closest friends. So it's going to be a great weekend.
That's a great story. I love that. I love hearing that about people who figure something out, see their success, go back, and now they're planting the seeds for the next future generation, which is so powerful. And you are being the charter president of that and seeing that fruition and seeing what it has done must just mean the world to you.
Absolutely.
Cool. So let me ask you this. So we all know, we all have these highs and lows in life. We read the ebbs and flows. When has there been a time in your life that you can think through a story where you hit a roadblock and you what? I have to dig deep. I have to bite down on my mouthpiece and figure this out. What are some principles you could pull from that story to share with our audience?
Well, when I came out of college, I wasn't the typical got a great job guy. I had a job that kind of sucked, quite honestly. I mean, and it wasn't the job, it was actually the pay. Mm-hmm. So when I got out, I was pretty poor. I mean, I really kind of struggled. But you mentioned goals. That's always been something that I've done. When I finished college, I sat down probably within the first month and wrote out my goals for the first year, for the 5 years, for 10 years, and for the rest of my life. I did this. So every year I would update the 1 year goal plan. And then in the 5 years, I would update that. I did this for a lot of years. And there used to be these things called Franklin planners. It was a calendar, and every year you would get pages that you track your life and your goals. In my basement in Ohio, I have still all those pages from like 1987 till about 2000 something, where I tracked and planned and tracked and planned. And then I actually got to a point where I was incredibly blessed. When I became the CFO of the county in Cleveland, I had exceeded everything. And other things came into play, which I never planned. Like, for instance, when I was straight out of college, marriage and children wasn't something that I planned for, but it happened. And, obviously that's a great thing, but I planned my life. So what I would continue to do is look at those goals and figure out what I needed to do to get to where I said I wanted to be. So when I was poor, that's when I was working at the bank. And what I did is went out and got a part-time job. And then I started a business. I used to do a video photography business. We would do reunions and weddings. So eventually I was making more on the weekends in my business than I would make in a month at the bank. But I just stayed focused and diligent and did what it took to get to where my goals were.
I love that. That is such an inspiring story, because I truly believe that we need more young men to understand the power of goal setting and habits. And when you do anything consistently long enough, you don't need to think about what you're going to do and the outcome. Put your head down, go to work. And one day when you look up, you're like, wow, I can't believe I've achieved this, or I've made it to this level, because success means something different to everyone. And that leads into this question. What does success mean to Mark Parks?
Well, success for me is happiness and joy. I am at a very strange point in life, right? So I just left my job maybe a month ago. And Rahz, that I have been talking about purpose-filled life and all the positive things and goal setting, and you can do what you want. And then, of course, I talk about financial literacy and the benefits of it. So I'm actually at a place where, and I don't talk about this that often, but I don't have a job, but I don't have money concerns at this point. So I'm about to embark on excitement where all I do is motivate, inspire, and spread positive messages. And I know it works, and I'm living proof. So that's kind of what success is to me, to be able to be in a position to do what you truly love and do it.
Outstanding. I love that. That's powerful. So we're going to land this plane, but I wanted to, I love that you shared that. And that's exactly what this is all about. You're a parent. I know that, we have parents that are going to be watching this and looking for some tidbits that they can take and say, oh, I can take this nugget from Mark. I love what Rahz said here. What's a tidbit of information that you could share with a parent to inspire and motivate their kids to kind of push through adolescence, moving into college and beyond? What would you say to your own kids that you could share to some parents that are watching?
Well, there was my kids, there was two things that were motivational. One is I would tell them absolutely that the academics are important, and if you focus on that, it'll make your life better. But my kids were and are athletes. So they love sports. So if you could, and you talked about gamification, if you can use what they love, whether it's sports or music or whatever it is, to help to teach them lessons, that's powerful. My kids, I had an app way back when they were playing sports, and we could track like my son's stats. So it's just like when you go to the game and you can say, well, you had X amount of rebounds, you did this, you did that. And they're looking at these numbers. So they're tracking things. So I look at taking what they love and trying to make that a learning experience exceeding just the game, but taking some of the properties of that experience and making it a learning experience. And my sons work with that very well.
Awesome. And my final question to you is one that is probably one of the more selfish questions for myself here this afternoon, is because I love to read. I struggled with reading my entire life until I got a handle on what that challenge was, and I overcame it. What is one book that you would share with our audience that has inspired you to success in life?
Well, my book is the book that inspires me a lot, but it didn't inspire me for life. Oddly, the one book that is very old and has pretty much answers to everything is the Bible. I mean, so if you read the Bible, you can find just about everything. I had a situation where I was in a job, and I'll just tell you quickly the story. I had a CPA firm that was very successful. My mother became terminally ill, so I stepped away from my firm and took care of her for, until she, unfortunately passed. Then I went back to work just to bring in some income, and a lot of people were surprised that someone who had reached the level that I had was actually at a job. And then I had this bad boss who was very challenging to work with. And I pulled out the Bible, which I typically have in my office. And I just, searched like, God, what are you doing to me? And at that point, as I started to read, it was clear to me that life is about service. And what I took away from this is forget about how I feel, forget about the negativity. How can I serve? And once I figured that out, my whole life changed. And that was kind of the approach that I took toward life. So now, wherever I am, I try to serve. And it served me very well, actually. But the Bible has a lot of lessons: eating, exercising. You can find it all there. So that's one of the great books to me.
Absolutely. Actually, this morning, one of my mentors said the exact same thing. So I definitely can relate to that. And I thank you for that. Mark, if someone wants to reach out to you, connect with you, learn more about what you're doing, where's the best place to do that?
Well, I'm on Facebook at author Mark A. Parks Jr. And my website is authormarkaparksjr.com. So those are two great places to find me. I'm also Money and Prosperity on Instagram, and that's where I am.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark. I really do appreciate your time this afternoon and your experience and knowledge that you've shared with this audience. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Once again, everybody, Rahz Slaughter, aka The Motivator with The Boom Show. This has been Rahz Slaughter and Mark A. Parks Jr. Rahz here, and I'm out. Stay motivated. Boom!